Hello there, and welcome back to the Sleep Science, where I take you on long, meandering journeys that double as history lessons and bedtime stories. Tonight, you're stepping out onto Earth as it once was, one enormous supercontinent called Pangea. Imagine the air warm against your face, the ground beneath your feet stretching not just for miles, but for entire horizons, until land swallows the curvature of the planet itself. No matter which direction you walk, you'll find no new continent, no crossing of seas unless you stumble toward the fringes where water curls like a blue ribbon around the edge of a single massive puzzle piece. It's both awe-inspiring and just a little terrifying. You probably won't survive this journey, let's be honest, but that's what makes it safe to dream about it here. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening, I'd love to know where you're drifting off from tonight. Drop your location and your local time in the comments, and I'll picture you nodding off from there. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You set out across Pangea, this massive landmass locked together about 250 million years ago, during the late Paleozoic and early Mesozoic eras. The ground is raw, rugged, scraped by ancient winds. The sheer size of this supercontinent alters everything, the climate to the winds, even the way rain falls. With so much land bundled together, the interior is scorched by sun and often bone dry, while the edges breathe easier, cooled by sea spray. It's a planet designed in extremes, a world without the balanced rhythms you know today. Walking forward, the sky itself feels different. The atmosphere is thick with volcanic ash from mountains that stretch higher than the ones you'd recognize now. You catch whiffs of sulfur, not constant, but enough to remind you the earth is restless beneath your feet. Sometimes the air feels clean, sharp here, almost pure, but then a breeze shifts and you cough at the sting of minerals. The landscape is massive in scale, yet eerily quiet. No human voices, no whine of engines, no roads carved across the plains. Just endless wilderness waiting to swallow you whole. Here's a historical fact to anchor you. Scientists first pieced together the idea of Pangea in the early 20th century, thanks to Alfred Wegener, a German meteorologist who noticed the continents fit together like jigsaw parts. His theory of continental drift was mocked at the time. Critics said he must have been dreaming. But now we know he was right, and that long ago all those continents you recognize, Africa, South America, North America, Europe, Asia, even Antarctica, were joined into one. And in this moment, you're standing right in the middle of it. Under your feet, the soil crunches dry, scattered with plants that look halfway familiar, halfway alien. You pass tall conifers, ancestors of the pines you'd see today, though leaner, darker, sharper in scent. The breeze rattles their branches, and needles fall in cascades, whispering against the ground. Occasionally, you spot the wide, fern-like leaves of Glossopteris, a plant that's spread across Gondwana, the southern portion of Pangea. These leaves grow so predictably in fossil form that they helped geologists prove the continents once touched. It's as if nature left breadcrumbs for humanity to follow later. The sounds are sparse. A distant cry of a reptile carries across the air, harsh, grating, not the kind of bird call you'd relax to at sunrise. Somewhere to your left, the water laps in a shallow basin, and you can picture creatures with half-evolved flippers dragging themselves ashore. A dragonfly buzzes past, wings glinting. Only this dragonfly is the size of a seagull. Its shadow sweeps across your shoulders before it vanishes again, swallowed by heat shimmer. You wonder, briefly, if swatting at that would even make sense. Probably not. Here's your quirky tidbit. The very name Pangea comes from Greek roots, meaning all Earth. It's the ultimate monopoly board, one landmass to rule them all. If you wanted to walk from what will someday be New York to what will someday be Morocco, you wouldn't need a boat. Just good shoes, a water supply, and a tolerance for blistering desert. Imagine how many steps your fitness tracker would log. Too bad Wi-Fi doesn't exist yet. The scale plays tricks on you. Distances that should feel far seem oddly close and then suddenly endless. Horizons blur with heat. If you squint, you can almost trace where mountain chains knit together. Ancestors of the Appalachians, for instance. Once pressed against what became Morocco when Africa and North America cuddled like tectonic bedfellows. Historians still argue whether the climate across those joined ridges was lush forest or brittle scrubland. You stand there, torn between imagining a green canopy above or an arid expanse dotted with thorny shrubs. Maybe it was both, depending on when you'd arrive. The days stretch longer than you expect. Without human noise, without buildings blocking your view, the sun climbs steadily, casting shadows you can measure like clock hands. The ground warms beneath your soles, rocks holding heat like coals in an oven. At night, that heat radiates back, glowing faintly. You'd think it might be peaceful, but silence this vast can be unsettling. The only comfort is the steady lap of waves if you camp near the coast, or the flicker of firelight if you trust yourself to spark a flame without disturbing too many curious eyes. And curious eyes there are. Synapsids roam these lands, creatures with sprawling bodies, halfway between reptile and mammal, some with teeth too sharp for your liking. Dimetrodon, with its tall sail fin, patrols certain river valleys. It isn't a dinosaur, not yet, but its silhouette is unmistakable and intimidating. You keep a safe distance, but the awareness of being watched never fades. The land is theirs, not yours. Still, there's a strange calm here. You trace your hand along bark that feels rougher than modern trees. You scoop water from a stream and feel its mineral tang coat your tongue. You watch clouds drag slowly across skies wider than you've ever seen. And as evening falls, the stars burn brighter, unpolluted by any light but their own. You lie back against the earth, realizing this supercontinent has been waiting hundreds of millions of years for someone like you to notice it. It's a humbling start, and only the beginning. You keep walking, and the deeper you go into the heart of Pangea, the more the world changes around you. The coastlines fade into memory, and the breezy air, thick with ocean salt, gives way to a heavy, unrelenting stillness. You're trudging inland now, and with each step the land grows drier, hotter, emptier. The sun glares down mercilessly, a hammer of light pounding onto cracked earth. This is the true core of Pangea, an interior so massive that clouds often never make it here. Rainfall has no patience for journeys across thousands of miles, so the sky leaves this heartland parched and waiting. The ground beneath your feet crunches, fractured into mosaics of clay and dust, like the crust of a pie that's been left too long in the oven. Here and there, low dunes ripple like frozen waves, and you squint to see mirages dancing at the edge of the horizon. If you've ever been in a desert, you know the sharpness of heat, the shimmering optical tricks, the silence that feels like it presses against your skin. But Pangea's interior deserts stretch wider than any modern Sahara. Some scholars suggest they spanned thousands of miles, uninterrupted, a brutal scar across the face of the planet. Your tongue feels dry, just imagining what survival would mean here. Water is scarce, plants are stunted, and shade is almost non-existent. Yet life, stubborn as ever, still finds ways to cling. A few scraggly conifers rise in clusters, their roots scraping for moisture buried deep in hidden pockets. They look like defiant green candles scattered across a barren cathedral. Beneath them, you might find early reptiles darting in quick bursts, lizard-like creatures small enough to vanish before your eyes fully adjust. The only sound is the faint hiss of wind pulling dust across the flats, whispering like some ancient riddle you'll never solve. There's a historical note worth tucking into your backpack. Geologists believe that this supercontinent interior was dominated by what's called the Central Pangean Desert, an enormous arid belt bigger than any desert you'd recognize today. Fossilized sand dunes still stand as testimony. Captured in cross-bedded stone, their sweeping arcs carved by winds hundreds of millions of years ago. Imagine that, a desert so immense that it left scars visible in rocks still studied by scientists today. You're not just walking through dust, you're walking through evidence. But deserts have quirks too. You pass strange ripple marks in dried-out mudflats, remnants of rivers that once braided through here before vanishing. Some might have been seasonal, flash floods roaring down from distant highlands only to disappear in days, leaving cracked labyrinths behind. If you squint closely, you notice peculiar tracks, footprints pressed into the earth by creatures that wandered through. Some belong to synapsids lumbering to find shade, others to lighter reptiles darting for insects. And then there are faint marks no one has identified yet. Here's your quirky tidbit. Paleontologists sometimes find trackways that don't seem to match any known species from the era, as though something mysterious crossed the desert and vanished without leaving a fossilized body behind. It's the kind of unsolved riddle that makes you wonder if the desert is keeping its secrets buried on purpose. The air itself plays tricks on you. You pause to wipe sweat from your brow, though, in truth, the heat is so dry, your body barely has moisture to spare. Your lips crack, your throat burns, and you imagine how ancient creatures adapted to such relentless aridity. Some may have burrowed underground, carving shelters to escape the midday blaze. Others probably roamed only at dawn and dusk, using the twilight hours to forage. Survival here is not about conquering the desert, but learning to dodge its temper. Historians still argue whether this vast dryness was constant, or whether there were brief ages when climate shifted, allowing temporary oases or lush corridors to cut through the desert belt. Perhaps Pangea pulsed between extremes, swinging like a pendulum, sometimes a barren wasteland, sometimes a slightly softer, greener plain. The debate lingers because the rocks carry conflicting stories. Some layers whisper of endless sand, others hint at rivers and swamps. You look around now and wonder which version you're standing in, the desert at its cruelest, or a merciful moment when the skies gave in and rained. Every so often the silence is broken. A shadow sweeps across you, and for a split second you tense, only to glance upward and see a massive insect buzzing overhead, its wings thrumming louder than a lawnmower. It's another one of those oversized dragonflies, likely Meganura's cousins, swooping across the open space as though the desert were a giant stage. For a moment, you laugh softly at how absurd it looks. Like a helicopter lost in the wrong timeline. The desert may be dangerous, but it doesn't mind offering the occasional comic relief. The further you walk, the more the land begins to feel alive despite its emptiness. Heat shimmers, shaping the horizon into shifting mirages that look like water, like trees, like anything but sand. You can't help but imagine what ancient humans would have thought, had they been here. Gods playing tricks, illusions meant to test wandering souls. You know better, but you still half expect to walk into an oasis that dissolves under your hands. And then there are the nights. Once the sun sets, the desert flips its script. Heat drains away as though the land is exhaling, and cold slides in fast, catching you off guard. You curl into yourself, teeth chattering, staring at the stars burning in the sky. They seem brighter than ever, their patterns alien yet timeless, constellations older than human imagination. You trace them with your finger, naming them whatever sleepy shapes you can invent. Giant bugs, spiny-backed reptiles, sails stretched against the night. Out here, the desert is not only harsh, it is honest. It gives you nothing but space to think, and it keeps its truths carved in stone. Your mind drifts as you lie on the cracked floor of the Central Pangean Desert. Tomorrow will bring more walking, more heat, more quiet resilience. But tonight, the stars remind you that deserts don't have to be dead places. They are places of memory, keeping watch over millions of years, waiting patiently for curious dreamers like you to wander in and listen. Morning arrives, and with it comes the relief of leaving the desert's burning core. Your path tilts downward, subtle at first, then more obvious. The land sloping towards something softer, cooler. You smell it before you see it. The tang of salt and the faint musk of kelp carried on a breeze. The inland silence is breaking, replaced by gull-like cries and the rhythmic push of surf. At last, you're drawing near the coast of Pangea, and it feels like stepping into another world. The horizon lightens into pale blue, and then water unfurls before you. It isn't the scattered patchwork of oceans we know today, but the edges of Panthalassa licking at Pangea's rim. Here, the sea presses right up against broad sandy flats that gleam like gold in the rising sun. Tidal pools dot the shoreline, each a little laboratory of oddities. Trilobites scuttling, crabs that haven't yet figured out their modern shapes, fish that nosedive into crevices only to flick away the instant you notice them. You crouch to look closer and catch a ripple of movement, something eel-like, with eyes that bulge a little too wide. It watches you, suspicious, before slipping away in a quick curve of muscle. Standing upright again, you stretch and the coastal breeze is a gift. After the choking dryness of the interior, this air feels alive, wet against your skin, cooling your lungs. If you had a hammock, this is where you'd string it up, swaying between a pair of gnarled coastal trees while watching the tide. But there's too much to see to waste time lying down. You walk along the surf, your footprints washed away seconds after you leave them, as though the ocean itself is reminding you not to expect permanence here. Historically speaking, coastlines in Pangea were buzzing with life. Fossil beds from what is now Germany and Morocco show remains of early amphibians and fish that use shallow waters as breeding grounds. Imagine wading into knee-deep water only to find it thick with wriggling bodies, like stepping into living soup. It sounds disgusting, yes, but also miraculous, life-expanding, trying out every possible body plan it could imagine. Some designs would fail, others would thrive, and in these tidal nurseries the future of the animal kingdom was quietly rehearsed. The sounds here are a chorus compared to the desert's monotone. Waves slap against rock shelves, foam hissing as it retreats. The screeches you hear are not gulls, but primitive pterosaur relatives wheeling overhead, their wings casting jagged shadows that race across the sand. You pause, shielding your eyes, and laugh under your breath at their awkward shapes. With their elongated jaws and leathery wings, they look like paper kites built by a child who had access to too much string. The comedy ends, though, when one swoops low, revealing a wingspan longer than your arm. You duck reflexively, but the creature is gone in an instant, flapping back toward the cliffs. Here's a quirky tidbit. Coastal zones in Pangea may have hosted enormous reefs, but not the coral reefs you picture today. Instead, they were built by sponges and microbes, reef systems that looked strange, bulbous, almost like piles of stacked cauliflowers. Scientists have found fossilized remnants of these ancient reefs in places like the Canadian Arctic, proving that once upon a time, even frozen lands were bathed in warm, shallow seas. Imagine swimming among those sponge castles, brushing against their surfaces, feeling them pulse faintly in the current. Not exactly the Caribbean vacation brochure you're used to, but still oddly inviting. As the sun climbs higher, you push further along the shoreline, watching how the land blends into sea and back again. Salt marshes appear, dotted with reeds taller than you. Their stalks whispering in the breeze, insects drone, frogs croak, and the occasional ripple in the water hints at something larger lurking beneath. You peer closer, catching the glimpse of a head breaking the surface. A reptilian snout, sharp and narrow, hovers for a moment before slipping back into the depths. Crocodile ancestors, perhaps, testing their new environment. They haven't yet grown into the armoured nightmares you know from today, but their presence is unmistakable. Eyes always above water, teeth always ready. Historians still argue whether these coasts were primarily swampy wetlands or more open, sandy beaches like modern tropical shores. Fossil evidence supports both, depending on where you look, and it's likely that Pangea's coasts were patchworks of habitats, each with its own community of creatures. You imagine walking from one cove to the next, stepping from a mucky bog buzzing with insects into a wide shell-strewn bay, filled with sunlight and darting fish. No two stretches of shoreline would ever feel quite the same. And then there are the evenings. Picture yourself standing barefoot at the water's edge as the sun sinks, casting molten streaks of orange and purple across a sky so vast it feels like it belongs to another planet. The tide pulls back, revealing flats where crabs scurry sideways and worm-like trails scribble patterns across wet sand. Somewhere down the coast you hear the slap of something heavy breaching, a marine reptile maybe, hauling itself partway ashore. You don't get close, you just watch, grateful that the ocean is wide enough to keep its mysteries at arm's length. You sit down finally, letting the cool foam wash over your toes. The rhythmic pull of waves is hypnotic, a metronome that slows your breathing, calms your nerves, almost makes you forget the dangers of this world. The desert behind you already feels like a dream, and here in the cradle of water and life, you feel closer to safety than anywhere else so far. If Pangea has a gentle side, it's here on its shimmering edge. Your gaze lifts from the shoreline and slowly you begin to grasp the scale of what lies beyond. That shimmering blue horizon you've been admiring isn't just another sea or bay. It is the edge of the greatest body of water Earth has ever known. Stretching beyond sight in every direction, the Panthalassa Ocean wraps itself around Pangea like a vast satin sheet draped across the planet. It is not one ocean, but the ocean, covering nearly 3/4 of the globe, so huge it makes the modern Pacific look almost modest. Standing here, you feel as though the world has flipped its balance, land clumped in one mass, and water ruling everything else. You step closer to the surf, toes sinking into wet sand as the waves tug rhythmically. Each crash of water sounds deeper, heavier, as if the sheer volume of Panthalassa lends the waves extra gravity. The smell of brine is sharper, cleaner, and when you breathe it in, your lungs feel filled with something older than time. You crouch, dip your fingers into the foamy edge and taste a drop against your tongue. It's saltier than any modern seawater you've tried, almost mineral rich, hinting at the immense chemical exchanges happening where ocean meets atmosphere. If you were reckless enough to board a boat and push out into this expanse, you would sail for weeks without seeing land. The scale is dizzying. Some researchers suggest that Panthalassa's currents were unlike anything in today's oceans, spiralling slowly across entire hemispheres, looping warm equatorial waters toward the poles and back again. It may have been Earth's first true conveyor belt of climate, driving winds, storms, and seasonal shifts across the entire globe. The creatures here are just as overwhelming. Schools of fish glitter beneath the surface, darting in unison like a living mirror. You see ammonites bobbing near the shallows, their coiled shells glistening as they rise and fall with the tide. Farther out, dark shadows sweep below the surface, and when one breaks through in a spray of foam, you nearly stumble back. It's an ichthyosaur, sleek and torpedo-shaped, with eyes as big as dinner plates, a predator built for chasing prey across open water. The sight of its dorsal fin cutting the waves is breathtaking, and also a little unsettling. You realise quickly that here, you are nothing more than a tourist at the edge of someone else's kingdom. There's a historical anchor to keep you steady. Fossil beds found on what is now Japan, British Columbia, and Chile all carry remains of marine reptiles and ammonites that once swam these very waters. Those places were not scattered continents then. They were all coastal outposts along the rim of Panthalassa. This single ocean stitched together the future Pacific Rim long before tectonic plates pulled them apart. When scientists dig fossils from cliffs today, they're unearthing tiny postcards from this very shoreline, proof that Panthalassa once lapped against every edge. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some paleontologists theorize that Panthalassa may have hosted gyres the size of continents, slow-moving, circular current systems that would have gathered floating debris into massive swirls. Imagine giant proto-garbage patches, but instead of plastic bottles, the flotsam would have been driftwood, dead fish, and the shells of ammonites. Entire floating ecosystems could have developed, like mobile islands adrift in the middle of nowhere. You picture climbing aboard one, balancing on logs while dragonflies the size of crows buzz around your head, and decide pretty quickly it's as best to stay near shore. The soundscape shifts as you continue walking. The roar of surf softens when you climb a dune, replaced by the deep thrum of waves colliding against rocky cliffs further down. Spray leaps into the air, catching sunlight in prismatic bursts. Seabirds, well, proto-seabirds, wheel and dive, their cries echoing against stone. It's a theatre of constant movement, endless rhythms, as if Panthalassa itself is rehearsing the same scene again and again, yet always slightly different. Historians still argue whether Panthalassa was uniformly deep or if it contained vast mid-ocean ridges and trenches similar to today's. Some suggest there may have been undersea plateaus larger than modern continents, hidden realms where unique ecosystems thrived. The fossil record, scattered as it is, offers only fragments. Were there creatures down there stranger than anything we've yet uncovered? The debate continues, fueled by every new fossil discovery that hints at something unexpected. And as you stare out across the water, the unknowable depths feel like a reminder that human curiosity will always be chasing shadows. You sit for a while on a flat rock, letting spray cool your skin. The hypnotic rhythm of the surf begins to work on you, a slow lullaby drawn out over millions of years. You think about how this single ocean would eventually splinter, how it would give birth to the familiar Pacific and Indian Oceans, how its memory would survive only in the rocks and currents we study today. But right now, in this moment, it is whole, immense, alive. Night creeps across the horizon, the water darkening to a sheet of obsidian. The stars ignite above and their reflections shimmer faintly on the restless surface. You lean back, listening to the tide breathe, feeling as though the universe itself is keeping time with Panthalassa's pulse. Out here, at the meeting of land and endless water, you are small, but you are not unwelcome. The ocean has room for everything, even dreamers standing at its edge. You wake to the sound of waves still rolling in, but today your focus drifts not to the endless horizon of Panthalassa, but beneath its glittering surface. You edge closer to the waterline, watching the tide push and pull in its hypnotic rhythm, and you imagine what waits under that shifting blue skin. For all the vast emptiness of the desert and the heavy silence of the coasts, the seas of Pangea are vibrant, thrumming with life at a scale that makes the land look like a rehearsal stage. Out here, Evolution is experimenting with strange body plans, bold colours, and strategies that will echo for millions of years. You dip a foot into the surf. It's warm, surprisingly warm, like slipping into a giant mineral bath. That warmth is more than just comfort. It's a clue. Shallow seas across Pangea often sat in greenhouse conditions, heated by sunlight and sealed in by high carbon dioxide levels. They became nurseries for new life, incubators where creatures grew fast and strange. You crouch, hand brushing through the foam, and you feel movement, small fish scattering around your fingertips. If you were to dive in, you'd enter a cathedral of glittering schools, spiral-shelled wanderers, and predators built for lightning strikes. The ammonites are everywhere. Coiled shells, some as small as coins, others as large as your head, bob and twist in the water. They look delicate, like nautiluses, but each one is a clever hunter, tentacles probing for prey hidden in sand or weeds. You follow one with your eyes, and it pulses like a living spiral staircase into the depths. Later, you'll learn that these creatures will endure for millions of years, only to vanish in the same disaster that ends the dinosaurs. For now, though, they are kings of the shallows, a sign that the seas belong to the coiled. A shadow glides past your legs and your pulse spikes. It's no shark, though it looks like one, sleek, tapered fins cutting the water like knives. It's a primitive ray-finned fish, jaw-strong, eyes unblinking. Behind it, another larger form rolls lazily, a ichthyosaur, one of the earliest marine reptiles. Its head breaches the surface for a quick breath, nostrils flaring, before it dives again with serpentine grace. You shiver at the realization that these waters aren't just home to small things, they're patrolled by sleek carnivores who see no reason to fear you. There's your historical anchor. Fossils of ichthyosaurs and their relatives have been found in Europe, China, and North America. Proof that during the Triassic, seas connected across continents, letting creatures roam freely. These predators weren't confined to one coast, they had the entire rim of Pangea as their playground. Imagine swimming from what is now Germany to Nevada, without hitting a continental barrier. The oceans were open highways, and every predator was a long-distance traveller. But the ocean isn't only about teeth and chase scenes. Strange gardens flourish here too. Reefs rise like underwater castles, though not the coral-studded ones you know. Instead, they're built by sponges and algae, their surfaces uneven, almost fungal, stacked in bizarre lumps and hollows. Colourful fish dart in and out of these structures, their scales flashing iridescent green and blue. In the shallows, sea scorpions, eurypterids still crawl, holdovers from a much earlier age. They're dwindling in number now, but seeing one scuttle across the seabed is enough to raise the hair on your arms. Imagine a scorpion as long as your arm, waving pincers in the filtered light. You don't linger near that one. Here's a quirky tidbit. Scientists have found evidence that jellyfish may have been drifting through these waters for over 500 million years. That means some of the blobs pulsing lazily offshore could easily be direct ancestors of the gelatinous stingers we dodge on beaches today. You watch one bloom like a translucent umbrella, pulsing gently in the tide. There's something almost comical about it. Here you are, surrounded by giant predators, and the creature that would probably ruin your day is a fragile, brainless blob with stinging tentacles. The soundscape changes as you wade a little deeper. The slap of waves gives way to a liquid hush, muffled and rich, punctuated by clicks and snaps of unseen creatures. You close your eyes and listen. The ocean hums like a living machine, its parts hidden, its rhythms both chaotic and precise. Somewhere out there, marine reptiles break the surface for air. Somewhere deeper, fish chase smaller fish in darting bursts. You feel like an intruder at a symphony, uninvited yet spellbound. Historians still argue whether these early seas were dominated by stable food webs or whether they were chaotic, experimental systems where extinction and innovation happened constantly. The fossil record is patchy, showing sudden blooms of species followed by mysterious disappearances. Were these ecosystems fragile, easily tipped into collapse, or were they tougher than they look, thriving despite constant upheaval? The debate remains unsolved, and as you watch schools scatter before a pursuing shadow, you sense the precariousness of it all. As the sun climbs higher, the water glows turquoise, a shimmering lens through which you glimpse entire worlds stacked beneath one another. You imagine yourself drifting farther out, carried by current, watching light fade to green, then blue, then black. Somewhere down there, creatures you can't imagine swim in silence, their bodies adapted to pressure and dark. The surface world is only half of the story. By late afternoon, the tide rises, waves pushing harder against the shore, foam spits against your legs, and you retreat to higher ground, sitting on a rock to watch the ocean breathe. For a moment, you close your eyes and simply listen. The hush, the crash, the hiss. It's a lullaby, one written long before humans, one that has rocked the earth to sleep for eons. You lean back, smiling faintly, thinking of how far oceans will change, reefs turning into graveyards, ammonites vanishing, new predators rising. But here, in this moment, Panthalassa's edge is alive with possibility, and you are lucky enough to sit at its boundary, soaking in the dreams of a prehistoric sea. You leave the shoreline behind, following a river that snakes inland through low valleys, and soon you begin to notice something shifting in the scenery. The air grows thicker, damp and fragrant, carrying the sharp resin of trees and the earthy breath of ferns. The further you walk, the more the barren coast gives way to lushness, until at last you're standing at the edge of an ancient forest, a realm ruled not by towering oaks or maples, but by plants strange and primeval. This is the domain of Glossopteris, a vast green empire that blankets much of southern Pangea. The trees are not trees as you know them. Glossopteris grows broad, tongue-shaped leaves that spread in dense mats overhead, shading the ground below. Some leaves stretch nearly a foot long, thick and leathery, their surfaces etched with delicate veins. They remind you of oversized spoons hung upside down, catching stray beams of sunlight and glowing a deep jade. The trunks rise slim and straight, not grand like redwoods, but sturdy enough to anchor the canopy. Between them, ferns uncurl their spiral fronds and horsetails rise like segmented bamboo, creating a layered understory that rustles with every shift of breeze. You step carefully into the shade, and the change is immediate. The air cools, dampness clings to your skin, and the silence of desert and shore gives way to a living murmur. Water drips from leaves, insects hum in the background, and somewhere above you a creature rustles through the canopy. You feel as though you've stepped not just into a forest, but into a living experiment, an early version of the green worlds that would someday dominate Earth. Here's your historical anchor. Glossopteris fossils are one of the strongest proofs that continents were once joined. Identical specimens appear in rocks from South America, Africa, Antarctica, India and Australia, all separated by oceans today but once neighbours on Gondwana. These plants did not cross vast seas. Instead, they spread across connected land, leaving a breadcrumb trail for scientists hundreds of millions of years later. Alfred Wegener leaned heavily on these fossils to support his bold claim of continental drift. Without Glossopteris, the puzzle of Pangea might have remained unsolved far longer. The forest floor crunches underfoot, littered with fallen leaves that decay slowly in the humid air. You pick one up, it's stiff, ribbed with fine lines, its surface still glossy even after death. In modern forests, fungi and insects would chew such litter quickly, but here decomposition is sluggish. You imagine thick mats of leaves piling up year after year, eventually compressed into the coal seams that humans will mine millions of years later. Your campfire of the future is forming quietly under your feet right now. As you walk deeper, you catch sight of peculiar cones sprouting from the trees, reproductive structures, neither flower nor fruit, since flowering plants won't evolve for many millions of years. Glossopteris belongs to the seed ferns, a now extinct group that blurred the lines between familiar categories. Their cones carry seeds that drift on the wind, hoping to land in moist soil. You picture tiny embryos tucked within, sleeping until the right moment, carrying the genetic memory of a supercontinent in their shells. Here's a quirky tidbit. In Antarctica today, researchers have found fossilized Glossopteris leaves preserved so clearly that the veins are still visible, despite being over 250 million years old. The irony is striking. Plants that once grew in warm, swampy forests are now entombed under ice. Imagine stumbling across a perfect leaf impression in a slab of rock at the South Pole, a postcard from a time when Antarctica was green and alive. Life rustles around you as you explore. Small reptiles scuttle across the forest floor, pausing to flick forked tongues in the air. Insects buzz between fronds, oversized beetles with shells that gleam like bronze, dragonflies perching on horsetail stems. You hear a croak, low and resonant, and glance toward a stream where amphibians laze in the shallows. Their slick bodies glisten in dappled light, their eyes unblinking as they wait for prey. It feels both alien and oddly familiar, like walking through a dream where all the furniture is just slightly wrong. Historians still argue whether Glossopteris forests form dense, continuous jungles or patchy groves interspersed with open wetlands. Some evidence suggests broad swamps dominated, while other signs hint at drier woodlands where trees grew in clusters. As you stand surrounded by this mix of shade, swamp, and fern-lined stream, you suspect the answer lies somewhere in between. The forest probably shifted with climate cycles, lush in wetter ages, sparse in drier ones, never fixed, always adapting. You stop to rest beneath a tree leaning against its trunk. Sap seeps slowly from a crack, sticky and golden, smelling faintly sweet. You press your finger into it and imagine it hardening, fossilizing, carrying the imprint of your fingerprint forward into amber millions of years later. Maybe some future paleontologist would hold it up to the light, puzzled at the strange whirls left behind. A fleeting thought makes you grin. Congratulations, you've just invented prehistoric graffiti. The day drifts on in the Glossopteris forest, sunlight slanting through the canopy in shafts of gold. You hear the forest breathe around you, a constant cycle of dripping, buzzing, croaking, rustling. By late afternoon, the air grows cooler, shadows stretching long across the forest floor. You follow the stream as it twists away, water reflecting leaves like green-stained glass. The forest is both protective and unsettling, a cradle of life, yes, but also a maze where unseen eyes are always watching. When night comes, you lie on a bed of fallen leaves, their leathery surfaces cushioning your body. Above, the canopy sways in the wind, whispering like a lullaby. You close your eyes, listening to the forest's endless murmur, knowing that beneath your back, layer upon layer of plant matter is slowly building toward a future of coal seams and fossilized secrets. In the silence of Pangea's forests, time itself feels heavy, pressing down like a blanket, reminding you that everything you see is both temporary and eternal. When morning light filters through the Glossopteris canopy, you rise and begin to notice movements larger than insects or amphibians. The forest hums with another presence, heavier, deliberate, and unmistakably reptilian. The ground softens under clawed feet, leaves snap and shadows stretch long where creatures far older than dinosaurs wander. This is the age when reptiles, particularly the synapsids and early ichthyosaurs, dominate the land, and their shapes mark a transition between eras, half familiar, half uncanny, with bodies that seem borrowed from multiple futures. You crouch low as one of them lumbers into view, Dimetrodon, the so-called sail-backed reptile, though in truth it isn't a dinosaur at all. It belongs to the synapsids, more closely related to mammals than to lizards. Its body is squat, sprawling across the ground like a giant muscular lizard, but the tall, spiny sail on its back rises like a banner catching the morning sun. Scientists suspect that sail helped regulate body temperature, warming blood in cool mornings and shedding heat in the afternoons. You can almost imagine it like a prehistoric solar panel, humming silently with borrowed sunlight. You hold your breath as it passes, its jaws lined with serrated teeth sharp enough to slice through muscle and bone. The creature doesn't notice you, too focused on a nearby rustling. A smaller reptile, perhaps an early ichthyosaur, darts through the underbrush. In a blur, Dimetrodon lunges, and the forest erupts with snapping branches, a squeal, and then silence. You wince, grateful for your observer status in this strange documentary world. Survival here is a game of stealth and teeth, and you are better off being ignored. Here's a historical anchor to ground the scene. Dimetrodon lived during the Permian period, long before true dinosaurs appeared. Fossils of this iconic predator have been found across North America and Europe, often so perfectly preserved that scientists can study the fine details of its teeth. For decades, people mistakenly grouped it with dinosaurs, but in truth it vanished millions of years before the first dinosaur even appeared. Its reign belonged to an earlier chapter of Earth's story, a reminder that dominance comes in cycles. As you continue through the forest, you encounter more of Pangea's ruling reptiles. There are small ichthyosaurs, nimble, lightly built creatures that scurry on two legs, their bodies upright in a way that foreshadows the dinosaurs to come. Their eyes are sharp, alert, and scanning constantly for danger. They snap at insects, chase amphibians, and vanish into shadows with startling speed. Watching them, you get a sense of evolution's rehearsal, like actors practicing lines before the main performance. These are the prototypes of the age that will follow. Then you see something bulkier. A synapsid known as moschops lumbers by, its thick body swaying, its head oddly flattened, as if squashed by an invisible hand. Despite its ungainly appearance, it's a plant-eater, content to graze among the low ferns. It chews slowly, drooling green pulp, and when it snorts, a cloud of steam rises in the cool morning air. You chuckle quietly. If dinosaurs are the sleek sports cars of prehistory, moschops is the family minivan. Awkward, but dependable. Here's a quirky tidbit. Scientists once debated whether moschops might have been able to use its thick skull in headbutting contests, much like modern goats or rams. Imagine these squat creatures squaring off, slamming for heads with a dull thunk while ferns tremble around them. It's equal parts comical and terrifying, and you're secretly glad you don't have to referee. The forest around you feels alive with this strange cast. Some creatures hiss warnings, others grunt softly, and you notice claw marks etched into tree trunks. Territorial signs that remind you not to get too comfortable. The air smells of resin and musk, layered with the metallic tang of blood from kills you didn't see. Every step feels like trespassing into someone else's ancient neighbourhood. Historians still argue whether synapsids like Dimetrodon hunted alone or in packs. Fossil evidence shows both solitary individuals and groupings of skeletons, but no clear answer. Were these predators like tigers stalking alone, or more like wolves working together? You watch one sailback shadow disappear between trees and wonder whether a dozen more might be circling unseen. The debate doesn't feel academic when you're the potential prey. By midday, the forest clears into a swampy flat and the reptilian chorus grows louder. Croak-like calls echo from the water, mingling with the bellow of larger creatures moving among reeds. A pair of ichthyosaurs wade at the edge, snapping at fish, their reflections rippling across the surface. You sit quietly on a log, trying not to draw attention, and realize that this ecosystem, primitive as it seems, is already complex and layered. Every niche is occupied, predators stalking, grazers munching, scavengers looking for leftovers. The afternoon heat builds, shimmering even under the canopy, and you catch sight of a Dimetrodon again. This time it's basking on a rock, sail angled perfectly to the sun. Its eyes half close in what looks almost like bliss. You're struck by how normal the behaviour seems. For all its alien features, it's just an animal warming itself, not a monster. That realisation softens the edges of fear, reminding you that every era's dominant creatures were just trying to live their lives. As twilight falls, the forest glows with firefly-like sparks, tiny insects blinking in the humid air. You lie back on the mossy ground, the canopy framing a slice of purple sky above. Somewhere in the distance, a sail-backed silhouette stalks the undergrowth, while nearer, a moschop snuffles through ferns. You close your eyes, letting their sounds wash over you, and drift towards sleep under the watch of Pangea's reptilian rulers. The next morning, before the sun climbs high enough to burn the canopy into glaring gold, you're drawn not by the heavy footsteps of reptiles, but by a constant hum, thin at first, then louder, until it becomes a chorus that fills the air. You step into a clearing, brush parting around you, and realise that this world is just as much ruled by the small and many-legged as by the sailbacked titans. Insects dominate the background of Pangea, and their scale is not something your modern mind is quite ready for. The first one you see looks familiar, a dragonfly darting above a shallow pond. Its wings shimmer in streaks of blue and silver, catching the morning's light. But as it swoops closer, your breath catches. It's no delicate backyard flyer. This creature, a meganeura, stretches nearly 2.5 feet across, wings buzzing like a low helicopter. It hovers in place with unnerving precision, then rockets away in pursuit of some smaller prey. You watch it snatch a beetle mid-air, jaws crunching audibly. The sound alone is enough to make you glad it doesn't consider humans part of its menu. The buzzing doesn't stop. Beetles the size of mice crawl over rotting logs, their shells gleaming like polished bronze. Centipedes wind across the ground in orange-banded coils. Their bodies so long they look like living trains slithering into the undergrowth. On a nearby trunk, a mantis clings vertically, its serrated forelimbs folded in prayer until, without warning, it lunges to spear an unlucky fly. Even your cautious footsteps stir up clouds of smaller insects, turning the air into a living glitter of wings. Here's your historical anchor. During the late Paleozoic, oxygen levels in Earth's atmosphere were significantly higher than today, sometimes reaching up to 30 or even 35% compared to our current 21. That extra oxygen allowed insects to grow to sizes unimaginable now, since their respiratory systems rely on passive diffusion through tiny tubes called trachea. In short, with more oxygen in the air, those tubes could deliver enough to support giants like Meganeura. You're literally walking through an age of superbug, and they take their evolutionary privileges very seriously. You pause near a patch of mushrooms sprouting at the base of a tree only to flinch when the soil shifts. A millipede the size of a small dog, likely a descendant of the earlier Arthropleura lineage, emerges, its armoured segments clacking softly as it moves. It doesn't seem interested in you, content to chew through decaying plant matter, but its sheer bulk makes you step back instinctively. The thought of tripping over one of those in the dark is enough to keep you awake tonight. Here's a quirky tidbit. Fossilised dragonfly wings from this era show tiny imperfections, scars left from battles with predators or collisions with plants. Some scientists speculate these giant insects were as much a nuisance then as mosquitoes are now, buzzing loudly, clattering into things, and occasionally crashing gracelessly into the forest floor. Picture a dragonfly the size of a crow flying into your hair. It would not be the gentle brush of wings you're used to, more like being tackled by a kite. You laugh nervously, swatting at a perfectly normal-sized gnat, grateful that not every insect grew oversized. The hum of wings becomes so constant that it fades into background music, broken only by sudden bursts, the clap of wings when a dragonfly darts, the rattle of a beetle flipping onto its belly, the hiss of a centipede brushing against dry leaves. The forest is alive with these tiny engines, and though you know the reptiles are the showy stars of Pangea, you start to suspect that insects were the true rulers, shaping the ecosystem in ways subtle and loud at once. Historians still argue whether these oversized insects were truly apex predators of their niches, or whether they coexisted uneasily with amphibians and reptiles that may have hunted them. Fossil evidence suggests bite marks on some exoskeletons, but it's unclear whether they were from scavenging or active predation. Were giant dragonflies fearless hunters, or were they sometimes just oversized snacks? The debate lingers, unresolved, while the forest around you buzzes as though it has already chosen the insects as its winners. As the day warms, the insect chorus swells. Heat shimmers through the air, amplifying the drone until it vibrates in your chest. You sit on a fallen log, brushing away a beetle that insists on exploring your knee, and try to take in the scale of it all. The buzzing, the clicking, the flutter of wings, it's like being inside an endless living orchestra where each player has decided to ignore the conductor. Chaotic, yes, but oddly soothing once you surrender to it. By evening, the chorus shifts. The dragonflies retreat higher, skimming above the treetops, while crickets begin to chirp in steady rhythms. Fireflies glow in brief sparks, tiny lanterns blinking in the underbrush. You lie back, listening, watching green flashes punctuate the gathering darkness. The hum fades to a low lull, like the forest exhaling. Wrapped in this insect empire, you drift towards sleep, realizing that even in Pangea the night belongs not to the giants but to the countless small voices that never stop singing. The morning arrives heavy with haze, and as you stir from your leafy bed, the air tastes different. Acrid, metallic, laced with the faint tang of smoke. You lift your gaze, and there on the horizon, a jagged silhouette looms higher than the forest canopy. At first, you think it's just another ridge, but then a column of ash unfurls upward like a grey banner, billowing against the pale sky. You are walking into the volcanic heart of Pangea, where fire shapes the land and the earth splits open to reveal the restless power beneath. The ground underfoot feels warmer as you approach. Stones crackle faintly, some coated in a thin glaze of glassy black where lava once cooled. You hear hisses and low rumbles, distant but insistent, like the planet is clearing its throat. Soon the forest thins, giving way to barren slopes dusted with ash. The trees here are stunted, their leaves curled brown from sulphur fumes. It smells of brimstone, sharp enough to sting your eyes. You pull your cloak tighter around you, if you had one, that is, and keep climbing toward the noise. When you crest a ridge, the view almost steals the breath from your lungs. Below lies a caldera, wide as a city, its rim glowing faintly red. Rivers of molten rock ooze from fissures, crawling slowly downhill in glowing streams. Every few minutes the ground trembles and bursts of fire spit into the air, raining molten droplets that hiss when they hit cooler stone. The sound is not a single roar but a layered symphony. Deep rumbles, high-pitched cracks, and the low hiss of escaping steam. You realise quickly that Pangea is not just land and life, it is also raw geology, constantly tearing and rebuilding itself. Here's your historical anchor. During the late Permian and early Triassic, volcanic activity across Pangea was immense. One of the most dramatic examples was the Siberian Traps, a massive region of flood basalts in what is now Russia. Over millions of years, lava covered an area larger than modern-day Europe, releasing carbon dioxide and sulfur gases that altered the global climate. These eruptions are often linked to Earth's greatest extinction event. Standing here, you are witnessing the kind of firestorm that once reshaped life itself. Closer to your feet, smaller fissures crack open, glowing with molten light like wounds in the Earth's skin. You crouch cautiously, peering into one, the heat blasting your face. Deep below, the crust groans, pressure building with each passing second. You imagine entire continents tugging against one another, stretching, breaking, hinting at the slow rifting that will one day tear Pangea apart. These volcanoes are not just hazards, they are harbingers of the future, carving the path for new oceans yet unborn. Here's a quirky tidbit. Ancient peoples who lived near volcanoes often treated them as sacred mouths of gods. Of course, humans are millions of years away at this point, but you can't help applying that perspective as you watch glowing fountains leap skyward. It really does feel like some colossal being is speaking through the earth, though what it's saying is lost in the roar. You toy with the idea of tossing in an offering, a stick, a rock, maybe even a sarcastic note scribbled on bark. Please don't kill everything, but the volcano seems unlikely to negotiate. The wildlife around this fiery landscape is sparse but not absent. You glimpse reptilian tracks skirting the edge of cooled lava flows, perhaps creatures seeking the warmth without the risk. Some smaller synapsids burrow nearby, using volcanic heat to stay warm during cooler nights. Even here, life adapts, treating danger as opportunity. Still, the silence compared to the forest is unsettling. You feel like an intruder in a cathedral where the god is very much awake. Historians still argue whether volcanic gases alone were enough to trigger global extinctions, or whether they acted in concert with other forces, methane releases, ocean anoxia, or asteroid impacts. The truth may be a tangle of causes, overlapping disasters amplified by time. But watching molten rivers crawl across the land, you don't doubt the volcano's power. One eruption might scar a valley. Millions of years of eruptions could alter the planet's very breath. As the day wears on, ash drifts down like grey snow, settling on your shoulders, crunching underfoot. You climb higher still, finding a perch on cooled basalt where you can look out across the fiery plain. The horizon wavers in heat shimmer, red streaks glowing against the dark earth. The smell of sulfur clings to your clothes, your throat dry and scratchy. Yet oddly, you feel calm. There's a strange beauty here, an honesty in the earth's violence. No masks, no hesitation, just molten truth spilling onto the surface. By dusk, the glow of lava replaces the sun, painting the land in eerie orange. Plumes of smoke catch the last light, turning crimson and violet. You sit in the ash, legs pulled close, listening to the ground's low rumble. It vibrates into your bones like a lullaby from the planet itself. As stars prick through the smoky sky, you drift into uneasy dreams. The heat of the volcano keeping you warm while the earth whispers its dangerous song. When dawn breaks, the horizon is still veiled with smoke, a reminder of the volcanic heart you left behind. You press onward, but something in the air feels heavier, more uncertain, as though the land itself carries a secret it hasn't yet revealed. The forests seem quieter, the rivers slower, the very pulse of Pangea subdued. Life is everywhere. Fish dart in the shallows, insects buzz lazily, reptiles bask on stones, but there's an imbalance you can't quite ignore. It feels like a world teetering on the edge, humming with warning. This is the shadow before Earth's greatest catastrophe, the Permian extinction, sometimes called the Great Death and Dying. At first, the signs are subtle. You kneel by a stream and notice that the water, though clear, carries a faint sourness when it touches your tongue. Perhaps volcanic gases have seeped into its source. Insects that once clouded the air are fewer, their chorus thinning like a choir losing voices. You glance at the trees, and some of their leaves appear oddly wilted, as if poisoned by air invisible to your eyes. A dragonfly falls suddenly from the sky, landing limp at your feet, its once glittering wings dull in the dirt. It's a small thing, but it chills you. Here's your historical anchor. The Permian extinction, about 252 million years ago, wiped out around 90% of marine species and 70% of land species. It remains the deadliest mass extinction in Earth's history. Though debates continue over the exact causes, many scientists point to prolonged volcanic eruptions, such as those in the Siberian traps, which spewed enough carbon dioxide and methane to alter climate dramatically. The oceans grew acidic, oxygen levels plummeted, and ecosystems collapsed like dominoes. You're standing in the uneasy prelude to that global unravelling. The deeper you walk into the forest, the more unsettling the silence becomes. Amphibians that once croaked through the night are fewer, their pools eerily still. You stumble upon a patch of Glossopteris leaves, brown and withered, carpeting the ground more thickly than usual. When you lift one, its veins are stained with a dark discoloration, as though poisoned from within. The forest, once humming with energy, feels like it's holding its breath. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some scientists propose that methane hydrates, frozen deposits beneath the seafloor, were destabilized during this time, releasing massive amounts of methane into the atmosphere. Imagine a hidden freezer under the ocean suddenly bursting open, flooding the planet with greenhouse gases. Sounds like a plot twist written by a very cruel playwright. Whether it happened exactly like that is debated, but the possibility adds a layer of strangeness to this already uneasy age. The reptiles seem restless. You watch a Dimetrodon pacing near a swamp edge, its sail rising and falling with its breath. It snaps at the air irritably, as if unsettled by something you can't sense. Nearby, a herd of moschops graze nervously, glancing up more often than usual, their low snorts echoing in the still air. Even the insects, once carefree masters of the forest, move sluggishly. It's as if every creature feels the imbalance, an instinctive awareness of decline long before collapse arrives. Historians still argue whether the extinction came in sudden pulses or stretched gradually over hundreds of thousands of years. Was it a catastrophic tipping point that changed everything in mere decades, or a slow decline that starved ecosystems little by little? Fossils tell conflicting stories. Some layers show abrupt die-offs, while others reveal drawn-out transitions. Standing here, you sense both. The creeping unease of gradual decline paired with the possibility that disaster could strike suddenly, mercilessly. By afternoon, the sky shifts strangely. A haze blurs the sun, filtering light into a dull, coppery glow. Shadows seem steered less sharp. And the temperature swings wildly, chill in the morning, blistering at midday, then strangely cool again. Climate instability is everywhere, written into every breeze and raindrop. You sit on a fallen log, brushing away ash that drifts from distant volcanoes, and wonder how long this world can balance on the knife's edge. Toward evening, you find a shallow pond, its surface film shimmering rainbow-like as though oil floats upon it. Frogs, once abundant, lie still along the banks, their bodies bloated, their throats swollen. A single survivor kicks weakly at the surface, then disappears below. You kneel, stomach tightening, realizing you're staring at the future written in miniature, an ecosystem unraveling from the bottom up. If the small things falter, the great things will soon follow. And yet, even here, the sunset burns beautiful. The sky glows crimson and gold through the haze, reflecting on the still waters. The contradiction feels sharp, a dying world wrapped in gorgeous colour as though the planet insists on beauty even while unravelling. You breathe deeply, the air tinged with sulphur and smoke, and feel the weight of time pressing down. You're not just witnessing a chapter of prehistory, you're standing at the brink of Earth's most devastating rewrite. When night falls, the silence is thicker than usual. No crickets, no frogs, only the occasional rustle of a reptile moving uneasily in the dark. You lie on your back staring at stars dimmed by drifting haze, and wonder if even the heavens look different through poisoned skies. Sleep comes slowly, heavy, burdened by the sense that tomorrow may be quieter still. You wake, but for a moment you wonder if you've gone deaf. The forest that once sang with insects, croaks, and rustling life is eerily quiet. The air is heavy, thick with a chemical tang that makes your lungs ache. You push yourself upright, noticing how the ground seems littered with still bodies, beetles on their backs, wings stiff, frogs pale and bloated. Leaves drop prematurely from trees that no longer look green, but a sickly yellow. Whatever balance once held Pangea's ecosystems together has broken. You are standing in the opening act of the Great Dying, and silence has become its anthem. The sky above is a dull bronze, as if clouds of ash have sealed away true daylight. The sun filters through as a hazy disk, too weak to cast shadows, yet too harsh to look at directly. The heat is oppressive, pressing down in sticky waves, and yet the light feels dim, like living under a permanent eclipse. You stumble toward a stream for relief, but even the water has changed. Its surface glimmers with strange sheens, oily rainbows that reek faintly of sulphur. When you dip your hand, the water feels warmer than expected, and the fish that once darted away are gone. Only a few carcasses float belly up, drifting slowly toward the bank. Here's your historical anchor. Marine life was hardest hit during this extinction. Studies suggest the oceans lost nearly all their diversity. Trilobites, which had survived for hundreds of millions of years through other disasters, finally vanished here. Coral reefs collapsed. Ammonites, though resilient, were decimated. The oceans themselves may have turned anoxic, stripped of oxygen, creating vast dead zones where nothing could survive. If you waded into Panthalassa now, you'd likely feel the suffocating stillness of a sea gone quiet. You walk further inland and find evidence of the same collapse. Reptiles still roam, but their movements are sluggish, unsteady. A sailback Dimetrodon lies collapsed near a streambed, ribs heaving shallowly, its once powerful jaws slack. Moschops graze half-heartedly, chewing at withered plants as though even they know the food no longer nourishes. You watch one stumble, legs buckling under its own weight, until it collapses with a low groan. You've seen landscapes empty before, but never this quickly, never this completely. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some paleontologists have suggested that for a brief time, fungi may have become the planet's dominant life form. With plants dying en masse and animals dropping in staggering numbers, fungal spores spread widely, feasting on the decay. Imagine entire forests reduced to mouldy graveyards, the air thick with drifting spores. You can almost picture it now as you kneel beside a fallen log, its surface covered in fuzzy grey-white growths. Each breath feels like inhaling the spores of inevitability. The debate about causes still lingers. Historians still argue whether massive volcanic eruptions alone were enough to trigger this apocalypse, or whether they combined with cascading effects, methane bursts, acid rain, collapsing food chains. Some even wonder if an asteroid played a role, though evidence is thinner than for the later dinosaur-ending strike. What is clear is that Earth entered a spiral of climate chaos, scorching heat waves alternating with chilling cold snaps, poisoned air and unstable seas. It wasn't one death blow, but a series of them, hammering every ecosystem until it caved. By midday, you climb a ridge to get perspective, but the view only deepens your unease. Where once you saw rivers glinting and forests swaying, now the landscape looks muted. Trees stand brittle, their crowns sparse. Valleys that once rang with the cries of creatures are empty, the only sound the low hiss of wind dragging ash across rock. You've grown used to feeling small against Pangea's immensity, but now you feel something different. You feel alone, as though even the Earth itself has lost interest in filling its spaces. Evening approaches, the haze deepening and the sky glows red, not from sunset but from distant fires. Forest patches burn unchecked, flames consuming brittle leaves and resinous wood. Smoke swirls above, blending with volcanic haze into one choking curtain. You sit on a boulder, coughing, eyes watering, as darkness spreads faster than usual. The crackle of fire replaces the calls of living things, and for a moment you wonder if this is what the end of the world sounds like. Not an explosion, not a scream, but a slow suffocating hush. And yet even here, small survivors cling on. You spot a reptile hatchling, tiny and delicate, scurrying across the ash in search of shelter. An insect buzzes weakly, managing to land on your sleeve before collapsing. Life is stubborn, refusing to vanish entirely, even when battered from every side. You take comfort in that as night falls, the world settling into silence once more. You lie back on the ashy ground, stars dim behind the haze, and wonder how long this quiet will last, or whether the next morning will bring silence deeper still. When morning comes again, the silence is still there, but it no longer feels like a new wound. It feels ancient now, as though the land has accepted the hush as its new rhythm. You rise, brushing ash from your arms, and begin walking through a valley that once must have thrived with buzzing insects and bellowing reptiles. Now the ground is littered with husks, fallen trunks, brittle ferns, skeletons half buried in dust. And yet, among the wreckage, you begin to notice something fragile, something stubborn. Life is returning inch by inch, testing the boundaries of this wounded earth. The first signs are plants. At the edges of dry stream beds, ferns push up fresh green fronds, curling slowly toward the sun. Their presence is quiet but insistent, like small banners staked in the soil declaring that survival is possible. Between the cracks of cooled lava, moss spreads in velvety patches, softening the black stone with muted green. When you crouch to touch it, the texture is almost comforting, cool, damp and gentle against your palm. For a moment you imagine the planet exhaling, letting the first hints of recovery take root. You follow a trickle of water downhill and find an even more surprising sight. Amphibians. Not many, just a few, but they cling to the stream's edges, their slick bodies gleaming. They croak faintly, a sound weaker than before but unmistakably alive. You sit quietly, watching one lunge for a beetle. Its aim is clumsy, its tongue slower than its ancestors, but the attempt itself is proof that life refuses to fade. You smile, relieved, though the sound feels strange in this landscape of loss. Here's your historical anchor. After the Permian extinction, ecosystems took millions of years to recover. Studies suggest it may have taken 5 to 10 million years before biodiversity returned to anything close to its previous levels. The Triassic period became that long, slow process of rebuilding, where small resilient species expanded to fill empty niches. Every fern sprouting in the cracks, every insect buzzing weakly through the haze is a step in that slow-motion comeback. Walking further, you find other survivors, reptiles, but smaller than the giants you saw before. These are the hardy kinds, creatures that can survive on little food, adapt to harsher climates, and reproduce quickly. You spot one scurrying along a rock, snapping up insects that dared to reappear. Its body is lean, its movements quick, its eyes sharp. In this new, fragile world, the survivors are not the largest or the strongest, but the most adaptable. It feels like a foreshadowing, a whisper of the evolutionary paths that will eventually lead to entirely new rulers. Here's a quirky tidbit. In some fossil layers from this period, paleontologists have found curious burrows, carved deep into the soil by unknown creatures. Some suspect they were made by small reptiles or amphibians that used underground shelters to escape the harsh surface conditions. Imagine entire hidden communities surviving in the dark, waiting patiently for the world above to calm. It's an oddly hopeful thought that even when the surface seemed doomed, life was quietly thriving below. Historians still argue whether recovery was steady, or if it happened in fits and starts. Did life rebound gradually, building layer upon layer, or did it collapse again in smaller aftershocks, each wave of extinction forcing a restart? Fossil evidence points both ways, with some regions showing bursts of diversity while others stayed barren. As you wander across this scarred valley, you can almost see both patterns at once, patches of green and croaking amphibians beside stretches of lifeless dust. It feels like walking across a chessboard mid-game, half the squares abandoned, the other half cautiously reoccupied. By midday, you pause in the shadow of a cliff where a thin waterfall trickles down. The rock face is streaked with minerals, painted in rusty reds and chalky whites by the chemical stew of runoff. In a shallow pool, you catch sight of tiny fish, silver bodies darting like quicksilver flashes. They're small, fragile, but mesmerizing. Proof that even the seas, battered though they are, still harbour sparks of renewal. You sit and watch them for a long time, letting the sound of dripping water lull you into something like peace. As the afternoon drifts on, you notice the sky is clearer than before. The haze is thinner, sunlight sharper. For the first time in what feels like ages, shadows return to the land, crisp and dark, stretching across the rocks. You follow your own shadow as it lengthens, feeling lighter, as if the planet is tentatively remembering how to breathe. The silence hasn't vanished, but it no longer feels absolute. It feels like the pause before a song starts again. By evening, the ferns rustle with a faint wind, insects click softly in the underbrush, and a lone reptile's call echoes across the valley. It's not the booming chorus of Pangea at its height, but it's something. You lie back in the moss staring at a sky now streaked with pink and orange, and let yourself believe in resilience. Even after the great dying, life stirs, fragile but relentless. whispering its way back into the cracks of a broken world. The days stretch onward, and slowly the silence of extinction gives way to the quiet murmur of new beginnings. You wake one morning to the sound of rustling near a stream, sharper and quicker than the sluggish reptiles you've grown used to. You sit up, watching carefully, and catch a glimpse of something small darting between ferns. At first, it looks like a lizard, but there's something different in the way it moves. It's lighter, quicker, its body angled upright, tail stretched behind for balance. You realise with a start, you're watching the dawn of the dinosaurs. The creature pauses, head cocked, alert to every shift of wind. Its forelimbs are short but agile, claws flexing as it scratches the ground. Its hind legs are long, built for speed, muscles twitching as if the very air urges it to sprint. When it darts forward again, the movement is smooth, almost bird-like, and you can't help but imagine it chasing prey across this recovering landscape. It's small, no taller than your knee, but in its bones lies the blueprint for giants yet to come. Here's your historical anchor. The earliest dinosaurs appeared in the late Triassic, around 230 million years ago. They were not the towering behemoths we imagine today, but small, nimble creatures such as Eoraptor and Herrerasaurus. These early forms were experimental, part of a broader radiation of archosaurs that included crocodile ancestors. Dinosaurs were not inevitable. They were one branch among many, but they happened to thrive in the fragile world that followed the Permian extinction. You follow cautiously, careful not to startle the little dinosaur. It pauses at a patch of ferns, snapping up an insect with a quick bite. Its head tilts side to side, eyes gleaming with a cleverness you hadn't seen in the lumbering synapsids before. This is a different kind of predator, light, agile, and adaptable. The more you watch, the more you feel evolution shifting gears, trading bulk and sails for speed and precision. Nearby, you spot another reptile, broader and heavier, grazing at low vegetation. It looks ungainly next to the spry newcomer, its body more reminiscent of the old synapsids. Yet it too is an archosaur, part of the diverse experiments that fill this age. The world feels like a testing ground, species rising and falling rapidly, each trying to seize the open niches left by extinction. It's chaotic, yes, but in the chaos lies opportunity. Here's a quirky tidbit. Paleontologists have uncovered tiny dinosaur footprints in Argentina, no larger than those of a sparrow, pressed into mud around 230 million years ago. These prints suggest that some of the first dinosaurs were barely larger than chickens, a far cry from the titans they would later become. Imagine stumbling across one of those little creatures today, pecking at the ground in your backyard. You'd probably mistake it for a strange bird, until it snapped up a mouse with needle-sharp teeth. Historians still argue whether dinosaurs rose to dominance by luck or by superiority. Some suggest they simply happened to survive climate swings better than their competitors. Others argue they possess key advantages, efficient breathing systems, lighter skeletons, that allowed them to outpace rivals. The truth may be a mix, but what's clear is that once they gained a foothold, dinosaurs spread rapidly, reshaping ecosystems across Pangea. Watching this little creature now, you sense that momentum building, the quiet inevitability of something vast to come. By midday, you rest in the shade of a conifer, observing as two of the small dinosaurs chase each other through the underbrush. Whether they're fighting or playing is hard to tell, but their speed is astonishing. They twist and dart, tails balancing, claws flashing briefly as they collide. The forest echoes with their screeches, high and sharp like whistles cutting through air. Compared to the heavy grunts of moschops or the lumbering hisses of Dimetrodon, this new sound feels alive, energetic, a promise of a livelier future. As the day cools, you notice the forest itself seems to be reshaping to suit its new tenants. Ferns and conifers dominate, creating layered cover for both hunters and prey. Insects have rebounded, buzzing in clouds, providing endless meals for small predators. Amphibians lurk near streams, cautious but plentiful. The balance is fragile, but for the first time since the silence, it feels like the ecosystem has rhythm again. The beat is quicker now, lighter, keeping pace with the darting strides of its new rulers. Evening brings a quiet moment. You sit by the stream where you first saw the dinosaur, watching as the water glows gold under the setting sun. A single creature steps into the shallows, lowering its head to drink. Its reflection ripples, stretching its thin frame into something larger, more imposing, almost prophetic. You realize you are not just watching an animal, you are watching a dynasty take its first breath. As night falls, the forest hums once more, not with the thunder of giants or the silence of collapse, but with the lively calls of creatures small yet full of promise. You lie back, listening to chirps, croaks, and distant screeches, and you know you've just witnessed the spark of an era that will burn for over 50 million years. The next morning, the air feels different again, not solemn, not empty, but restless. You rise with the sun filtering pale through streaks of cloud, and immediately you notice how quickly the weather shifts. One moment, the forest around you hums with life. The next, the wind sharpens, rattling the leaves, carrying a chill that doesn't belong in this latitude. You're beginning to understand that Pangea is not only vast in size, but moody in temperament. Climate swings are the continent's heartbeat, erratic and unpredictable, and you are caught inside its pulse. You walk out of the forest into a plain dotted with ferns and conifers, the land open enough to see the horizon. The morning starts warm, sunlight sharp and almost comforting, but within hours the sky turns slate grey. Clouds gather with startling speed, low and heavy, their bellies bruised with violet and green. The air thickens until it presses against your skin, and then, as if some unseen hand tips a basin, rain crashes down. Sheets of water hammer the earth, flattening ferns, cutting rivulets into the soil. Within minutes, the ground is slick with mud and streams swell into raging torrents. You leap back as one small gully transforms into a rushing channel, carrying branches and stones downstream. Here's your historical anchor. Evidence from rocks suggests that Pangea experienced dramatic monsoons, particularly along its coastal margins. Seasonal rainfall would swing between bone-dry droughts and catastrophic floods, shaping landscapes in cycles of abundance and scarcity. Fossilized riverbeds and sediment layers preserve these patterns, a geological diary of ancient storms. You're not just getting wet, you're standing in the very weather that left its fingerprints in stone for us to read millions of years later. The storm passes quickly, as abruptly as it arrived. Within an hour, the clouds thin, and sunlight breaks through in shimmering shafts. Steam rises from the soaked ground, turning the plain into a glowing mist. Ferns stand upright again, glistening, while insects emerge from hiding to dry their wings. You breathe deeply, the air fresh, almost sweet after the downpour. But even as the warmth returns, you know it won't last. Pangea's climate never rests on one setting for long. By afternoon, the sky shifts again, this time in the opposite direction. The wind sharpens, colder, carrying an edge that bites at your skin. You wrap your arms around yourself, watching, as frost begins to creep across the edges of puddles. It's bewildering. Hours ago you were drenched in summer rain, and now the air tastes of winter. You tilt your head northward, imagining the massive interior of the continent, where distance from the ocean means no buffer against extremes. In those heartlands, winters must have been brutal, summers searing, the swings far sharper than anything you've known. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some paleontologists believe that even at the equator, Pangea may have experienced occasional snowfall. Fossilized glacial deposits in regions that once sat in tropical zones suggest bizarre and abrupt cold snaps. Imagine a rainforest suddenly buried in frost, dragonflies frozen mid-flight, reptiles waking to a world turned white. Whether these events were frequent or rare, they add to the impression that Pangea's climate was less a stable stage and more a chaotic experiment. Historians still argue whether these climate swings were the main driver of evolutionary change or just the backdrop. Did species adapt and thrive because the world forced them to, or would dinosaurs and their kin have risen regardless? The debate continues, with each new fossil bed offering clues but rarely clear answers. Standing here, shivering slightly as the wind shifts once more, you feel the weight of that uncertainty. It's easy to imagine evolution nudged by storms, floods, and droughts, as though the planet itself were sculpting its cast. By evening, the pendulum swings again. The chill lifts, replaced by a heavy, muggy warmth. Clouds streak orange and red across the horizon, steam still curling from the wet soil. You sit on a rise overlooking the plain, watching herds of reptiles move cautiously across the open ground. Some graze on fresh ferns, while others stand guard, alert to predators lurking nearby. The creatures seem to move with the weather, their behaviours tuned to shifts in temperature and moisture. They are not merely surviving the swings, they are built for them. The first stars appear as twilight deepens, their light faint behind wisps of cloud. You lie back in the damp grass, body cooling under the night air, and think of how disorienting it must have been to live in such instability. One day scorching, the next freezing, rain that drowns, drought that starves. And yet here you are, surrounded by the life that adapts with a kind of stubborn elegance. Insects still buzz, small dinosaurs still dart through shadows, plants still push upward. The climate may swing wildly, but the persistence of life is steady, a rhythm that does not break. As sleep draws near, you listen to the breeze carrying scents of wet soil and resin, the remnants of rain and the promise of more storms to come. The world is unstable, unpredictable, but not hopeless. You close your eyes, letting the irregular heartbeat of Pangea's climate lull you toward dreams. The next stretch of your journey carries you across a landscape that feels uneasy, in its own skin, as if the very ground beneath your feet is restless. You've walked deserts, forests and the coasts, but here the earth itself seems to be shifting, pulling apart slowly but relentlessly. Cracks zigzag across the plains, long scars filled with rubble, some wide enough to swallow a river. Standing at the edge of one, you peer down and see layers of stone peeled back like pages in a book, each layer telling a story of ancient seas, forests and extinctions. It dawns on you. This is the beginning of Pangea's breakup, the first hints of the continental drift that will one day carve the familiar world map we know. The air smells faintly of sulphur, carried from fissures where steam hisses upward. The ground trembles now and then, not in the violent jolts of earthquakes, but in deep, slow shudders, like the earth sighing under strain. You climb a ridge to see farther, and the view is striking. Across the horizon, new mountain ranges bulge upward, while valleys sink, rift zones opening in jagged lines. It feels less like standing on a finished planet and more like watching one in the middle of construction, cranes still at work. Here's your historical anchor. Scientists believe that rifting began in earnest during the late Triassic and early Jurassic, when the supercontinent started to split into Laurasia in the north and Gondwana in the south. These movements were driven by convection currents in the mantle, the slow churning of heat beneath the crust. Over millions of years, cracks widened into seas, and seas expanded into oceans. The Atlantic itself was born from this process, a scar that kept stretching until it became a permanent divide. You follow one of these rift valleys, where fresh rock glistens dark and glassy, cooled from recent volcanic eruptions. Lava has hardened into sharp ridges, brittle underfoot, while nearby pools bubble with hot springs. You kneel by one, dipping your hand into water warm enough to sting her, smelling faintly of minerals. Tiny microbes thrive here, invisible to your eyes, but quietly reminding you that life always takes advantage of cracks and heat. Even in the most unstable places, biology rushes in to fill the gaps. Here's a quirky tidbit. When Alfred Wegener first proposed continental drift in 1912, many scientists mocked him, arguing that continents couldn't just plough through ocean crust. It wasn't until decades later, with the discovery of seafloor spreading at mid-ocean ridges, that his vision was vindicated. Today you're standing in exactly the kind of rift zone that would prove him right, an ancient preview of the forces that will scatter Pangea's puzzle pieces across the globe. As you trek onward, you notice how ecosystems adapt to this unstable terrain. Ferns and conifers colonize fresh lava flows, their roots creeping into cracks, stabilizing soil that didn't exist a decade earlier. Reptiles bask on warm rocks, their bodies soaking up the residual heat. Streams reroute around new fissures, carving fresh paths through stone. The land may be breaking apart, but life isn't panicking, it's opportunistic, quick to claim every new edge. Historians still argue whether the breakup of Pangea was gradual and consistent or punctuated by sudden bursts of activity. Some layers of rock suggest steady movement, while others hint at catastrophic events, massive rifts opening quickly, floods of lava pouring across the land. Perhaps it was both, long stretches of slow stretching punctuated by violent shifts. Watching the ground tremble beneath you now, it's easy to imagine the earth doing both, stretching and tearing in unpredictable rhythm. By midday, the sky is hazy with smoke from distant volcanic vents. You sit on a rocky outcrop, feeling the ground vibrate faintly and trace the lines of future continents in your imagination. That ridge over there will someday drift north to form Europe. This valley beneath your feet will widen until it becomes the Atlantic. The thought makes you dizzy, standing at the crossroads of continents, watching the world redraw its map. As evening falls, the horizon glows red from scattered eruptions like campfires lit by giants. You lie back on the cooling basalt, stars pricking the smoky sky above. The constellations look alien, shifted by the movement of tectonic plates, but they shine steadily, patient witnesses to a planet still assembling itself. You close your eyes, listening to the faint hiss of escaping gas, and let yourself imagine the continents drifting apart slowly, silently, while you drift into dreams of a world not yet formed. You leave behind the trembling rift valleys, carrying with you the sense that Pangea is no longer whole but already unravelling. The landscape ahead is quieter, layered in stone outcrops that jut like shelves from the earth, stacked one upon another as though time itself has been pressed into a visible archive. You run your hand along the ridges of a cliff face, feeling grooves etched by ancient waters and the ghostly imprints of leaves fossilised long before you arrived. These rocks are not just scenery, they are libraries, and in their pages, humanity will someday learn to read the story of Pangea. You picture the scientists of the future, dusty hats, brushes sweeping gleefully across stone, eyes widening as strange shapes emerge. A fern leaf pressed flat, a trilobite coiled in perfect detail, a ripple pattern frozen in mud. Each fossil is a letter in a language no one intended to write, yet one that patient minds can decipher. The creatures you've walked among, the forests you've touched, the storms you've endured, they will all become fragments in this archive, waiting quietly until someone learns to listen. Here's your historical anchor. The idea that rocks contain a record of the past dates back to the 17th century, with naturalists like Nicholas Steno, who first proposed that layers of sediment build over time. Later, during the 19th century, figures such as William Smith mapped strata across England, showing how fossils in specific layers could be used to tell time's story. Without Pangea's vast, layered deposits, much of Earth's geologic puzzle would have remained unsolved. You kneel to study a slab of stone broken from the cliff. Across its surface is the delicate fan of a Glossopteris leaf, veins crisp as if pressed yesterday. You trace the outline with your finger, marvelling that this plant once swayed above your head and now whispers through rock. The thought is dizzying. Time has folded the forest into stone and stone into a story. You're not just standing in a forest clearing, you're standing in the margins of a textbook waiting to be annotated. Here's a quirky tidbit. Fossils from Pangea have been found in some of the least expected places. Glossopteris leaves appear in Antarctica, proof that the frozen wasteland was once green. Dinosaur footprints pepper the deserts of Morocco. Even coal seams in North America carry the ghostly remains of swamp forests that thrived in the supercontinent's tropics. It's almost comedic. Pangea left souvenirs scattered across every modern continent, like a careless traveller leaving luggage behind. The more you look, the more the land feels layered with meaning. Rippled sandstone tells of ancient rivers. Cracked mud preserved in shale speaks of droughts. Volcanic ash beds cut through the sequence like bookmarks, marking moments of fiery interruption. You pause at one such layer, running your hand across its gritty surface, and wonder whether some distant researcher will one day identify this very bed as evidence of a specific eruption. Perhaps even your footprints pressed in mud could fossilize, a tiny mystery for future scholars to puzzle over. Historians still argue about how to interpret certain fossil finds. Was a cluster of bones a predator's den, or a river's unlucky collection of carcasses? Were scratches on a rock hunting marks, or simply erosion mimicking intention? The debates unfold endlessly, reminding us that reading the Stone Library is never straightforward. Every fossil is both a revelation and a riddle. As you gaze across the cliffside, you feel humbled by the enormity of those riddles, millions of years condensed into a canvas, but one that resists easy translation. By afternoon, the sun glints on the rocks, turning their surfaces gold. You wander through a dry gorge where layers tower above, striped in ochre, red, and cream. Each stripe is a chapter: floodplain, desert, swamp, volcanic ash, and you feel like a time traveller wandering through paragraphs of Earth's diary. You stop often, crouching to inspect a shell here, a leaf there, trying to read even a fraction of what lies before you. The silence of extinction may have hushed the world, but the rocks are never quiet. They speak in their own language, slow and steady, waiting patiently for someone to ask. As twilight settles, you find a sheltered ledge and sit with your back against stone warm from the day's sun. You imagine yourself as both witness and future echo, walking here now but also leaving traces that may one day be read by others. Perhaps a paleontologist will brush away sand and find your imprint, puzzled at the strange pattern of a human shoe among the bones of reptiles. You chuckle softly, the idea absurd but oddly comforting. In a way, everyone who touches this land becomes part of its archive. Night falls and the cliffs glow faintly under the stars. You close your eyes, leaning against the stone, and feel its steady presence pressing at your back. It's not just rock, it's memory. And memory, even when buried for millions of years, has a way of resurfacing. You drift into sleep knowing that Pangea will speak long after its forests are gone, and humanity will someday lean in close to hear its whispers. When dawn washes the cliffs in pale gold, you rise and find yourself thinking less about what you can see and more about what you can't. The land is layered with mysteries, but the way we interpret them is anything but unanimous. You've seen forests, deserts, oceans, extinctions, and rebirths, but the truth of Pangea isn't just in what happened, it's in how we argue about it. Every fossil is a clue, yes, but also an invitation to debate, and scholars have been debating Pangea for over a century with no signs of stopping. As you walk along a riverbank, you imagine a room filled with paleontologists, geologists, and climate historians, each waving their hands passionately. One insists the breakup of Pangea was steady and predictable, while another slams a fist on the table claiming it came in bursts of catastrophe. Someone else gestures at a fossil leaf, arguing it proves monsoons ruled the land, while their colleague points to sediment layers, insisting drought was the true master. Even the rocks beneath your feet seem to grin at the chaos, happy to fuel centuries of academic squabbles. Here's your historical anchor. When Alfred Wegener proposed continental drift in 1912, many scientists ridiculed him. His evidence, fossil distributions, rock matches across oceans, even ancient glacial patterns, was compelling, but no one could imagine the mechanism that moved continents. It wasn't until the 1960s, with the discovery of seafloor spreading and plate tectonics, that his theory gained full acceptance. The debates that swirled for half a century remind us that truth often crawls before it walks, and sometimes it has to stumble into a rift valley before anyone believes it. You pause beside a sandstone outcrop where ripples are frozen in stone, preserved like a memory of vanished rivers. Were they carved by a mighty flood that swept across Pangea's plains, or by the steady trickle of a calm stream? Historians still argue over details like these, even when the evidence is under their fingertips. Some interpret such ripples as signs of catastrophic monsoon bursts, others as markers of stable wetlands. You crouch low, tracing the grooves with your finger, and wonder which version of the story you'd write if given the choice. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some scientists argue that dinosaurs might not have risen to dominance purely because of natural advantages, but because their rivals were unlucky. Certain early archosaurs and synapsids may have been just as capable, but happened to live in regions harder hit by extinction pulses. In other words, dinosaurs may have been the beneficiaries of a cosmic musical chairs, slipping into the empty seats when others stumbled. Imagine explaining to a proud Tyrannosaurus that its entire dynasty might have started because of sheer dumb luck. The debates extend even to climate. Did Pangea experience predictable seasonal monsoons, or was the weather chaotic, swinging unpredictably between extremes? Some models suggest stability, while others point to constant disruption. Standing here, you feel the heat pressing on your back and the sudden chill of wind cutting across your face, enough to make you laugh softly. Maybe you're both right, you whisper to the scholars. Knowing the land could change moods in a single afternoon, historians still argue whether the Permian extinction was caused primarily by volcanic gases or by a cascade of interconnected disasters. Was it carbon dioxide alone, suffocating the oceans, or methane hydrates bursting from the seafloor doubling the effect? Did acid rain poison the plants first, or did rising heat cook ecosystems before the rain even fell? The truth may be all of the above, overlapping in the cruel sequence. You think of the silence you walk through and realise it hardly matters which domino fell first. Once they started, none could be stopped. By afternoon, you climb another ridge, gazing over an expanse of plains shimmering in heat. From here, the scale of the debate feels humbling. Every patch of rock could mean something different to someone else. A swamp to one geologist, a floodplain to another, a desert to a third. The land doesn't argue back, it just sits quietly, holding its secrets while humans squabble over translation. It's almost funny the way millions of years of history can reduce brilliant minds to bickering toddlers in a sandbox. Here's another debate that makes you smile. Were giant insects like Meganeura truly dominant predators, or were they fragile oddities that only flourished briefly? Some scientists insist they were apex hunters of their ecosystems, while others suggest their reign was exaggerated. A blip in evolutionary time. Watching the sky above you, you imagine a massive dragonfly swooping past, its wings slicing the air. Apex predator or not, you know you wouldn't want it landing on your head. Evening paints the landscape orange, and as you rest against a boulder, you think about how these arguments are less about answers and more about curiosity. The fact that scientists still argue means the world still inspires wonder. Pangea isn't just a supercontinent. It's a puzzle box, each layer offering pieces that may never fit neatly. You smile, soothed by the thought. After all, certainty is boring. It's the mystery that keeps us awake, or in your case, helps you drift off. As stars blink awake overhead, you close your eyes and let the echo of those scholarly debates fade into the wind. The land hums beneath you, ancient and patient, unconcerned with who wins the arguments. Pangea has already spoken. Humans will keep quarrelling about the translation. The debates echo in your mind as you set off again, but soon your thoughts shift from scholars in dusty lecture halls to yourself. All this time you've been a drifting witness, floating through deserts, forests and coasts without consequence. But now you pause and wonder, what if you had to live here? Truly live with no promise of slipping back into the comfort of the modern world? What would survival look like on Pangea? The question feels absurd, but your mind latches onto it, weaving possibilities as you walk. First, food. You glance around at the ferns, conifers and cycads, realizing how little of it looks edible to you. Glossopteris leaves are tough and leathery, more like green roofing tiles than salad. Horsetails and ferns might offer some starch if boiled, but your teeth ache at the thought of gnawing them raw. You'd likely turn to insects, the oversized beetles and dragonflies that buzz around you in endless supply. Crunchy, yes, but packed with protein. Imagine yourself roasting a giant dragonfly wing over a fire, chewing it like jerky while whispering, well, at least it's paleo. Then there's water. Streams are plentiful, but after watching frogs and fish collapse during the Great Dying, you'd hesitate to drink without caution. Maybe you'd learn to scoop from fast-flowing currents, avoiding stagnant pools where toxins might settle. You'd need to dig shallow wells near riverbanks, filtering water through sand and charcoal. Survival here wouldn't just be about finding resources, it would be about learning to dodge poison delivered by the land itself. Predators are another matter. You picture yourself building a shelter of branches and mud, only to wake with a sail-backed shadow sniffing at your door. Dimetrodon wouldn't think twice about tearing into you, and even the smaller ichthyosaurs could outrun you with ease. You'd have to live like the burrowers, staying hidden, moving quietly, never drawing attention. Fire might be your only defense, though it risks attracting curious eyes or wings. The thought of accidentally luring a nothosaur inland makes you shiver. Here's your historical anchor. Early hominins won't appear for another 200 million years, but survival skills like tool-making, fire use, and social cooperation will be the traits that eventually give humans their edge. On Pangea, stripped of technology, you'd essentially be a fragile mammal improvising in a reptilian world. The irony is sharp. Our species, kings of the Anthropocene, would be nothing but nervous snacks in the age of ichthyosaurs. As you walk, you think about clothing. Modern comforts are gone. No cotton, no wool, no synthetic fleece. At best, you'd gather fibrous plants, weaving rough mats to drape around your body. If you were desperate enough, maybe you'd attempt to scrape and dry reptile hides, though you'd risk the wrath of a parent moschops if you tried. The image of yourself stumbling through the forest draped in patchy, half-cured scales is both ridiculous and slightly horrifying. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some survival enthusiasts today experiment with eating ferns and cycads, only to discover many are mildly toxic unless prepared carefully. You imagine yourself trying to invent cooking techniques with nothing but sticks and rocks, muttering, "This doesn't work, at least I'll be fossilized interestingly." Perhaps that's the ultimate joke. Your survival attempt becomes just another odd imprint in stone for future paleontologists to puzzle over. Shelter would be critical. The forests offer branches, but storms and floods would tear through flimsy huts. Caves near volcanic ridges could provide safety, though sulfur fumes might knock you out before you got comfortable. Burrowing seems the best bet, digging shallow pits and covering them with branches like the animals who already mastered this trick. You'd sleep close to the earth, heartbeat pressed against heartbeat, borrowing its warmth and hoping it didn't tremble too hard during the night. Historians still argue whether the small mammals already scurried beneath the feet of Pangea's giants. Some fossil evidence suggests tiny shrew-like creatures were evolving in shadows, feeding on insects and hiding in burrows. If so, you'd envy them. Their size, adaptability and knack for disappearing might have been the true ticket to survival. You, by contrast, stand tall, conspicuous and painfully unequipped. It's humbling to imagine being the least prepared organism in an ancient wilderness. By evening, the thought experiment deepens. You picture yourself building a routine. Mornings spent gathering insects and ferns, afternoons spent patching shelters, evenings crouched by a smoky fire warding off reptiles. You'd measure time by storms and droughts, by migrations of small dinosaurs across the plains. Your life expectancy? Short, but not meaningless. Every day would be a victory, every sunrise proof that you managed to dodge extinction for another cycle. As the stars rise, you stretch out in the grass, still amused by the absurdity of it all. Could you survive on Pangea? Probably not. But imagining it draws you closer to the creatures who did, to the resilience woven into every fern and insect wing. You close your eyes, smiling faintly, and let yourself drift into dreams of a campfire flickering against the sails of Dimetrodons, the laughter of survival echoing softly in the ancient night. When morning light spreads across the plains, you find yourself gazing out at the horizon with a strange thought. This all looks familiar in a way. Not in the details, the giant dragonflies, the sail-backed predators, the fern forests, but in the outlines. The way mountain ridges curve, the shape of river valleys, the contours of coastlines. It's as if you're peeking at a puzzle before it's been broken apart, seeing the pieces that will someday drift into the continents we know. The echoes of modern geography are all around you, faint but undeniable. You walk along a ridge and trace the shape of a coastline below. The bay curves just so, a mirror image of what you've seen on maps between Africa and South America. It clicks. One day this seam will split, the Atlantic will pour in, and those continents will drift apart like two friends who once stood shoulder to shoulder. The thought makes you grin. If only you could draw a chalk line here for future cartographers, labeling it break here in 180 million years. Here's your historical anchor. Today, the fit between South America and Africa is one of the most striking pieces of evidence for continental drift. Their coastlines align almost perfectly, a jigsaw fit so obvious that even early explorers noticed it. Add in the matching fossil records, Glossopteris plants and Mesosaurus reptiles appearing on both continents, and the case for Pangea becomes undeniable. You're standing in the age when all those puzzle edges are still pressed together, whole and seamless. The river you follow turns broad and slow, carrying silt that glitters in the sun. Its floodplain stretches wide, and for a moment you imagine how it will one day shrink into smaller tributaries, carving the Amazon basin in one direction and feeding the Congo in another. The idea that these mighty rivers share an ancient ancestor here on Pangea feels surreal, as though all waters spring from one cradle before scattering to every corner of the globe. Here's a quirky tidbit. Geologists sometimes refer to the supercontinent cycle, the recurring pattern of continents assembling into a single landmass and then breaking apart again. Pangea is only the most famous example. Before it came Rodinia, and before that Nuna, each supercontinent playing its role in Earth's restless dance, which means that, given enough time, the scattered continents of today may once again fuse into one. Imagine some future geographer standing where you are now, mapping the outlines of Pangea Proxima. You almost want to leave them a note. We've been here before, don't get too comfortable. The terrain grows rockier as you move toward higher ground, and from your vantage you see mountain chains rising in jagged arcs. Some will someday form the Appalachians, while their counterparts in Africa will become the Atlas Mountains. At present they are one, fused together, their spines continuous across the continent. It's like catching a glimpse of two siblings before life sends them down different roads. The thought fills you with a quiet melancholy, as though you're saying goodbye to a family you didn't know you had. Historians still argue about the exact sequence of Pangea's breakup. Did the Atlantic open first, or did Gondwana fracture before Laurasia drifted north? The timeline is pieced together from magnetic minerals in rocks, frozen like compass needles that point to where the poles once lay. Each layer tells part of the story, but interpretations differ. Standing here, you can feel that uncertainty in your bones. The land is shifting, but no one knows quite how the dominoes will fall. By afternoon, the sun is high and the plains shimmer with heat. You sit beneath a conifer, sketching imaginary maps in the dirt with a stick. First, you draw Pangea as you see it now, one massive block of land. Then you score a crack down the middle, sketching the Atlantic as a slender wound. Next, you slide South America away from Africa, North America drifting from Europe. Your stick scratches further, Antarctica sliding south, India racing north toward Asia. By the time you're done, the crude outline looks almost like a modern globe. You chuckle, brushing the dirt away, humbled by how much time stands between this moment and that reality. As evening settles, you climb another ridge and watch the sun dip toward Panthalassa. The coastline glows in gold, its curves oddly familiar, as though it's already been traced on a map in some faraway atlas. You breathe deeply, the air warm, the earth steady beneath your feet, and feel the weight of continuity. Every step you've taken through deserts, forests, coasts and rift valleys has led to this recognition. The past is not gone. It's woven into the very shapes of the continents we live on today. You lie back on the ridge as twilight deepens, stars flickering into view above. Somewhere far in the future, people will look at their globes and atlases, learning the names of continents, Africa, Asia, Europe, the Americas, without realizing they're tracing the torn edges of a once whole land. For now, though, you see it all together, vast and complete, humming with echoes of the future. And in that thought you drift towards sleep, lulled by the slow rhythm of drifting continents. The final stretch of your journey feels softer, almost dreamlike, as though the land itself is dimming the lights for you. You walk along a gentle slope, the air calm, the sky painted with streaks of rose and violet. Pangea is still vast and alive around you, its forests stretching, its rivers flowing, its reptiles prowling, but there's a sense of impermanence woven into every sound and shadow. You know now what the future holds. This mighty continent will not last. Already the cracks are forming, already the seas are creeping in, and in time the whole will dissolve into fragments drifting across the globe. You sit by a quiet stream, its surface golden with sunset. Insects flit lazily above the water, their wings glowing like embers. A small reptile dips its head for a drink, unbothered by your presence, as if it knows you're only passing through. You trail your fingers across the surface, watching ripples distort your reflection. For a moment you imagine that reflection splintering first into two, then into many, just like Pangea itself, a face broken across oceans yet still belonging to one whole. Here's your historical anchor. The breakup of Pangea set in motion the arrangement of continents we know today. The Atlantic Ocean opened, separating Africa from the Americas. India tore away and drifted north until it collided with Asia, giving rise to the Himalayas. Antarctica slid into the southern polar region, freezing into the icy giant we recognize now. Every feature of our modern world, from mountain ranges to ocean basins, is rooted in the slow disassembly of this ancient supercontinent. As twilight deepens, you reflect on how many echoes of Pangea remain hidden in plain sight. The fossils of identical plants across continents, the mirrored coastlines, the mountain ranges that once aligned like zippers, each is a reminder of unity disguised as separation. The continents today may look scattered, but they are still family, still fragments of a whole that once ruled the planet. In your mind's eye, you take the globe and press the pieces back together, watching them click into place like a puzzle. The fit is perfect, almost too perfect, and you can't help but smile at the elegance of it all. Here's a quirky tidbit. Geologists speculate that in the far future, hundreds of millions of years from now, the continents will drift back together into a new supercontinent, sometimes nicknamed Pangea Proxima. It might form near the equator or closer to the poles, depending on how tectonic forces play out. The idea is both comforting and humorous. Earth, it seems, can't resist putting the puzzle back together, even if it takes eons to do so. Like a toddler scattering blocks across the floor only to gather them up again, the planet is always rearranging its toys. Historians still argue whether humanity's imagination of Pangea says more about the planet or about ourselves. Do we marvel at its unity because we crave connection in our fractured world? Do we study its extinctions because we see our own vulnerabilities reflected there? The debates continue, but standing here at the end of your journey, you feel no need to choose. Pangea is both a geological fact and a metaphor, a reminder that wholeness and fragmentation are just different moments in the same cycle. Night falls slowly, the stars igniting one by one. The land is dark but not frightening. Crickets sing again, rivers murmur, and the air cools with a soothing steadiness. You lie down on a bed of moss, eyes fixed on constellations that have witnessed every shift of land and sea. Somewhere above, the Milky Way stretches like a river of light, timeless and unmoved by drifting continents. You breathe deeply, letting the rhythm of the universe seep into your chest. The world around you begins to fade, not in destructions, but in gentleness. Forests dissolve into shadow, rivers into whisper, mountains into outline. Pangea itself begins to drift in your imagination, its massive shape breaking apart, pieces sliding slowly away until they blur into dream. You follow them, floating with the continents as they drift, carried by tides of deep time. The motion is slow, soothing, like being rocked in a cradle older than humanity itself. And in that rocking you find peace. The desert heat, the ocean roar, the reptilian cries, the insect hums, all of it softens into memory, distant but comforting. You're no longer a stranger wandering Pangea, you're part of its story, carried gently forward into the currents of time. Now the journey has quieted, the pace slows, and your breath follows suit. You feel the weight of millions of years slipping away like sand through open fingers. The supercontinent that once stretched endlessly under your feet is gone now, replaced by the continents we know, scattered yet still connected in deep ways. You let that thought rest on your chest, that separation does not mean loss, that distance does not erase history. The world around you softens, the colours of Pangea's forests and deserts fade into muted tones, their outlines blurred like watercolour left in the rain. Even the creatures grow quiet, Dimetrodon lowering its sail, dragonflies folding their wings, small dinosaurs curling into nests of fern. They sleep, and so do you, lulled by the silence of a land that has lived and died, broken and mended, countless times. The rhythm of the earth is steady, patient. Continents drift, climates swing, species rise and vanish. Yet through it all, there is continuity, a whisper of persistence woven into the fabric of stone and soil. You are part of that rhythm now, not rushing, not resisting, just floating in its endless tide. Your body grows heavier, your thoughts slower. The vast plains of Pangea dissolve into the soft expanse of your own dreams. Rivers become murmurs, winds become sighs, stars blur into gentle sparks above you. You are safe here, in the quiet of deep time. The story has ended, but the comfort remains, wrapping around you like the warmth of ancient sunlight still lingering in stone. Breathe it in, let it hold you, and drift away, back to your own night, your own rest. Sweet dreams.